Addicted to Creating. Welcome, everyone. So, today's episode, I'm featuring another good friend of mine. I've got Tanesh Marimuthu. And what makes this episode, first and foremost, very, very special is that we are on either side of a day. So, I'm not explaining that very well. So, it's Saturday morning, just after 6 o'clock in South Africa, and it's 10 p.m. in Texas, in USA. So, why am I talking to this dude out in Texas? So, today's episode is really about creating a life abroad. And my good friend Tanesh and his family, that's what they've been able to do. He's going to be giving us some insights about his life, his upbringing from the Durban days, and what led to him taking the plunge and going out and living with his family in Texas. We're going to be covering a range of topics. He's a very, very interesting guy, one of my more vocal friends, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Tanesh Marimuthu. Welcome, Tanesh Marimuthu, to Addicted to Creating. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Soren. It's really a pleasure to be on the podcast with you. We've been friends for a long time, and it's fantastic to see this creative initiative that you're undertaking, and I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, Tanesh. And I noticed there's signs of that American accent coming through. I'm just going to warn you. I'm going to warn you, keep that in bay. Warn you to keep that in bay. But look, jokes aside, Tanesh and
Well, you know, Soren, I always laugh because I've had folks and friends and family that have come to the United States for a week or two, and they come back with a thick American accent. And I've been here 8 years now, and it doesn't seem to have totally rubbed off on me for some reason.
Yeah. No, but I think what happens is, like, you know, with intros like this, because we almost dial in our let's just say work language. I know exactly, like what you just said. If you listen at the end of this, when we're done with the podcast, you'll see that there was a difference between the first minute of you speaking and what happened towards the end. As you settled in, you went back into 100% South African. You were like 95% and something 5% slipped in there in the welcome.
Okay.
Which is probably due to work. Like, you know, you're doing a presentation and how's it, guys, and stuff. And funny story, because when we were doing our Kontiki, Seelan and myself and a few of the other guys, as you're aware, we started talking like the Americans, you know, especially. Yeah. So what would happen is we do that little inflection in the end. I'm going to McDonald's.
That's right.
I'm going to McDonald's. and then we were like, no, wait, hold on. It's just the two of us here. Why are we talking to each other? So that's I'm going to kick off. I'm going to go straight into it. And what I have in mind when I pick my guests, apart from this also being very, very biased, like a lot of the previous episodes with people that are very near and dear to me or close to me, is that I try to get into the mind around, you know, where you are right now is influenced by a lot of history. It's influenced by a lot of personal history that shapes us to be the people that we are right now. And no one is devoid of that. I think there's very few people I've spoken to that are devoid of that. And in your case, I want to jump into when I got to know you. I think the most interesting part were two areas when we got to become friends in University of Durban, Westville. And the first was the swimming, okay? And the second was our mutual love for collecting music and also music knowledge. But what I want to go into with regards to the swimming first is paint a picture for the listeners around your swimming days. And I know it was a very family orientated thing. And yes,
Yes.
your timing, like many people in your era, was totally out. And I'm sure that must have given you some frustrations in terms of, South Africa not being able to compete. But I'd like the listeners to get a feel for what that was like. I was never a swimmer. Heck, I only felt comfortable in the water a
Mhm.
couple years ago.
Right.
You're in another mode compared to us. And maybe tell us a bit how that was for you guys growing up, and what it felt like and how you'll kind of manage those frustrations. Maybe you want to start with that, Tanesh.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll use another Americanism. That's a great question, Soren. Uh,
Yes.
so let's go back to when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. Growing up in Durban and living on the East Coast with the wonderful beaches. We used to take family trips out to the beach on a regular basis, with the whole family. It was a recreational activity that is part and parcel of growing up in Durban, right? Everybody
Absolutely.
there knows about that. And on one of those occasions, we were in a beach environment, and we were playing in the water, and I kind of got taken out to sea, a little bit, not totally out, but I was getting dragged in by the current. And luckily, there was other family members about, and somebody noticed and pulled me out of the water. And my parents were horrified with that episode, and they insisted that I needed to become water safe. And that really was the start of me getting into swimming. And it started off going to the pool on a regular basis and learning from the lifeguard at the Asherville swimming baths. He used to do swimming lessons over the weekend to make a little bit of money, extra money. And that's how I started learning how to swim. And being the eldest in the family, I kind of led the way for the rest of my siblings in that regard. And we quickly picked up the sport, and we quickly picked up the skills of swimming. And there was a community swimming club that was also based at Asherville Swimming Pool. And we wanted to proceed with the sport and move into a competitive space. And as a result, we joined the Otto Swimming Club based at Asherville Swimming Pool. And this was a community-based swimming club, which is really important to note. There's probably very few of those around now. And it was special even back then because it was completely, administered by volunteers, as well as the coaches of the swimming club were volunteers as well. And there were two main coaches that coached me, Rajan Naidu, who's now Dr. Rajan Naidu, and Saras Mudli. And Rajan at the time had just completed high school and was starting, and he used to be a competitive swimmer. And his father was Mr. Morgan Naidu, who was an administrator in non-racial swimming and a leader in swimming. And so he was involved in swimming from a young age as well. And it was his passion for swimming that kind of drove him to do what he did. And what was awesome was that he was studying medicine at the time, which is quite an onerous task, right? Being able to study medicine, yet he still dedicated his time to come to the pool and share his knowledge and his coaching with all of us young swimmers. And Aras Mudli, who was the other coach, was studying engineering at the University of Durban Westville, mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
And she as well was somebody that took the time out to help us and coach us. And
But I just want to cover, I want to cover one part of it first before you go
yes.
through the rest. What was it like, and what age were you when
Yeah.
you were, aspiring to go the regional, provincial, national route? When was it, you were basically in your prime, and tell us what that was like, the competitive aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's interesting. When we are in kind of standard 5 and standard 6 level, which is what, grade 7, 8.
Yeah.
That's when we started going on tours to various parts of the country to join in the competitive swimming events. Now, to do that, you had to qualify and be part of the provincial swimming team. And that involved kind of training, on a regular basis at the swimming pool in the afternoons, mostly for about 3 hours, and sometimes close to competition time in the mornings as well, maybe for an hour or two. So it was, swimming is quite
Sure.
a difficult sport. It requires a fair amount of dedication and time in the pool, as well as miles covered.
Yeah.
And it was only through the support of my parents and the coaches that we were able to be successful at it. And at that age, we started in the school competitions as well as the club competitions. And there were what we call galas, and now they call swim meets almost every weekend. And we were able to participate in those events and set our best times and achieve qualifying times to be able to then compete at the next level.
Yeah, but you're too humble because you're not telling us about those many medals, and we all have seen those pictures with you and your siblings with the medals all over you guys, and filling the cabinet at home. Tell us about what I really want to get to is those last few races, I'd imagine, where you knew that either you couldn't take it further or the barriers were there. What was that like? I'd like for the listeners to get a sense of that, because I'm sure, like we spoke about it and we never go into this much detail before, it must have been
Yes.
highly frustrating, and I'm really keen to know how you got over that amount of disappointment.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? As I progressed my career up into swimming, I was able to achieve kind of the provincial level of swimming, and my brother was able to do better than me, and I think performed at a higher level, and my sister did better than both of us, and she was able to achieve at that time, South African records in her races. So I think it was kind of a progression. As we got that experience, we were able to improve our performance and our times. Now, the thing about swimming is that, being based in a community club in Asherville, you kind of have a limited time frame when you can swim, even in Durban, right?
Yes.
And the best swimmers were the ones who were able to swim throughout the year and had the benefit of heated facilities. And that was a limiting factor for us in terms of, how much training, how many hours we could put in the pool, and therefore how far we could go. Now, later on in our careers, as we got better at swimming, there were professional coaches that we got involved with that assisted us and particularly my sister in getting to a much higher level.
Yes.
For me, unfortunately, based on the age, when you get to kind of matric level and you have to focus on your studies, swimming kind of took a back seat at that stage. And, I wasn't really able to progress further than that.
Now, I know you've been heavily involved, which I would say is almost going full circle in terms of swimming administration with our national setup. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. After I qualified in university and I went up to Johannesburg, at that time, the swimming organization was setting up a Learn to Swim program, a national program to teach swimming and improve water safety across the country. That was the aim of the program. Yeah. And I was fortunate at that time to be selected to be one of the first facilitators that was trained by an Australian and a very experienced Australian facilitator. And we at that time attended a workshop where we were kind of taught how to facilitate and teach swimmers, learn to swim teachers how to go on and teach swimming.
Right.
I did well at that course and was able to pass the requirements. And then I started hosting learn to swim courses in various locations in and around Gauteng, surrounding areas. And we would have about, between 15 and 20 candidates attend those lessons, and we would take them through a program over a weekend to share the theoretical knowledge of how to teach swimming, and then we would also share with them some practical aspects, and we would have them go and spend time at qualified learn to swim schools to continue learning. And then when they came back after 2 or 3 months, we then put them through a practical exam and certified them as official Swimming South Africa learn to swim teachers. And then they were able to go out and teach on their own. So I was involved in all of that with the swimming crowd. I must have, been through probably 100 or so courses, having trained, a few thousand people. And that was a great sense of accomplishment, I think. You feel like you were making a difference and helping put qualified trainers out there teaching swimming.
Wow, that's awesome. So Tanesh, the next part I want to get into is obviously we all, progressed through university together.
Yes.
And started families and, I would say got quite established with our careers. Tell us about your journey. I'm calling it the journey of beer.
Okay.
I hope I'm not dumbing it down, but it's your journey of beer right from the start to how you find yourself now in Texas.
Yeah, so I've been in the beer industry now for about roughly 20 years, and it's been a fantastic journey, I must be honest, to start from the end. I was actually, after college, involved in the mining industry, and I worked, mostly in that kind of arena. And when an opportunity came up in my hometown, Durban, for a position at the Prospecton Brewery,
yes,
I jumped at the opportunity and applied for the position. And they were looking for somebody that had the engineering experience, but also was able to understand the business and interact with the business folks in order to bridge the gap between the applications that needed to be developed and the engineering that was required to develop them. And I went for an interview with a guy that was interestingly named Shannon Castle, very active for South African beer company. And it took them a while before they were able to actually have me join the company. They were going through some changes and so on and so forth. After about 6 to 8 months, I ended up at the Prospecton Brewery in Durban and started my career in beer way back then as a business analyst. And I have very fond memories of working at Prospecton. It was an awesome place. It had fantastic folks that worked there, and great memories of what we were able to accomplish there. Manager Shannon Castle moved to corporate. I acted in his role as a manager of the IT systems at the brewery. And after about 6 months, I was appointed in the role. And I spent another 4 or 5 years there, basically completing the work that Shannon started, modernizing the control systems at the Prospecton Brewery.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned the mining part, because that was the first start for you, right? Was it Mintech, right? Mintech.
Yeah, I started off as Mintech as a, what do they call them? Engineer in training, right?
Right, right. Yeah, we
role
had the same
to
in
start off.
Telecom as well, engineer in training.
Yeah,
That was a
yeah,
line
and
that they
they
gave
had
us as
given
well.
me a bursary, I think, in the third year of studies,
Yeah,
and as a result, that was a nice thing because you kind of get a job after you finish work. You don't have to go out and search for a job,
yeah,
and it was a great experience. And because at an early age in my first job, I was able to travel internationally.
yes.
The company, I spent a fair amount of time going to India and various parts of India. I traveled to France, and these were great experiences for a young engineer starting off his career to be able to get that exposure. It was fantastic.
And the interesting part is, as in my case, we did so much of traveling during that period, but our loves were back home in South Africa, and we met our wives back home.
Right,
As you know,
right.
with me, the traveling in Ericsson was hectic, and after only a year with Ericsson, after I'd met Lynette towards the tail end of it, actually, then I decided to that the international traveling was a bit too much for us to pursue things in, and that's when
Yeah, I mean,
we
you can only do that for a certain
amount
period
of
in your
time.
life,
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
It takes a lot of, it takes quite a toll on you
Yes.
as, your family members. So
So
it
so
does work out in a family environment, right?
Yeah. So now with the relationships and wives and with kids, paint the picture for us about this big decision to go to the US. How easy or difficult was it to make the move? And what's it been like once you did do the move? You've been there now for many years, adjusting and acclimatizing.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to work in an international environment. I think that work that I did at Mintech and the exposure I got there
Yeah,
really encouraged me to look for opportunities abroad.
yeah,
And I always, as an individual, wanted to prove myself internationally. So that was something that we always had in the back of my mind as to something that I wanted to do and achieve in life. And when I met Fiona, and we got married, and I shared with her that aspiration. She was very much supportive of that idea, and she was she helped a lot in terms of the preparation and the work to be able to get us here. And I was very fortunate again, working in the beer industry. Uh, Beer is brewed and made almost all over the world. And I was very fortunate working in SAB in South Africa. SAB was on a huge drive to expand internationally, right? And at that time, they had bought the Miller Brewing Company in the United States, which was one of their first acquisitions internationally. And, it gave me the opportunity to look at moving within the company to the USA. And at the time in the US, they were going through a huge upgrade of systems, and a lot of the resources at the breweries were sucked into that program. And that created an opportunity for me to be able to move in a parallel role to the Fort Worth Brewery in Texas, and be able to kind of do the same job that I was doing. Back then, I was working at Roslyn Brewery in Pretoria, and I was able to apply for and get support from the company to move across to the United States. And at that time, I had my son, and he was, I think, about probably 5 years old. So, it kind of made sense to make that move. And, when people ask me that question, why did you leave South Africa? It was never a case of being unhappy with South Africa. South Africa is and will always be home. But we were interested in pursuing our careers and getting international exposure. And when it became available, I grabbed the opportunity and took it.
wonderful.
And I've been based at the Fort Worth Brewery for about 8 years now. And initially, I must say, it was a difficult transition, Suren, coming to the US, especially for my son. He had some difficulties initially with making the transition. But, kids are very adaptable, and they grow very quickly. And he was able to overcome that initial difficulties. And he hasn't looked back ever since. And we've also, in the last 5 years, added to the family.
Of course.
We have an American as well. My daughter Shreya was born, and she's a true blue American.
Yeah.
And we're pretty settled here now.
And in terms of life in Texas, we spoke about it many times about how unique the state of Texas. It's like, this is how we do things in America, and this is how we do things in Texas. So you want to paint the picture for, some of those unusual things that are unique to Texas versus many of the other states, because, even, as South Africans looking at the US, it's easy to say, oh, well, yeah, this is how it's done in the movies, or this is how it's done in LA, or on the West Coast, or in the East Coast. So this is how life probably is for Tanesh. But no, we learned it was a bit of a rude awakening. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so, Texas is kind of considered the only state in the US that has the option to pull out of the United States. Because at the time, there were Six Flags that actually flew over Texas over the years. And at the time when the United States purchased Texas from Mexico, it was written into the clause of the deal that at any time the citizens of Texas want to pull out of the United States, they have that option. And they take that very seriously here. Not to say that they will ever execute that option, but we'll throw it to you and say that they have that option when they it's necessary, But to be honest, Texas is kind of different from the rest of the states. Yeah. And I've had the opportunity to travel to a number of places, both on the East, West coast, as well as Milwaukee, Chicago. And it certainly is a very laid back environment. There are lots of parallels, actually, having come from South Africa, being based in Pretoria, I draw a lot of parallels to living in, Centurion in South Africa versus living in Texas. And everybody here drives in big SUVs, just like they do in Gauteng. Everybody likes and enjoys their beer, just like in Gauteng. Everybody has at least one gun, maybe two if you include the shotgun, just like they do in Gauteng. So yeah, there's lots of similarities, I think, between. And then also people love the outdoor lifestyle, right? Texas is a very flat state. It used to be a desert, right? And with a whole lot of, engineering, there's a lot more greenery now in Texas, but still it gets pretty dry and very flat. So you have to travel quite a distance. Probably about 5-6 hours on the west side to get to the mountains. But mostly people enjoy going out, in the wild, hunting, fishing. That's all part of the lifestyle of being in Texas. And then, on the other side, you also have some technology aspects to it that I find interesting. There's NASA based in Houston, the famous Houston, we have a problem. And there's also SpaceX now that's also has a huge base in the southern part of Texas. Toyota has a huge factory in San Antonio, Texas. And there's obviously the oil and gas industry that is quite big in Houston as well. So, there's a lot to offer folks in Texas. The cost of living compared to the rest of the United States is pretty fair. And so there's been a mass migration of folks from California, New York, to come to Texas and live here because of the laid back environment, the low cost of land and housing. It's very attractive, and it's become a growth area within the United States.
Yeah, I've noticed that with just commentary that I get from a lot of podcasts where a lot of entertainers, comedians, excuse me, have actually started migrating or leaving, especially during COVID times, from their bases out of like New York or Los Angeles to to Texas. So I found it very, very interesting. And to your point, a lot of them firstly enjoy the laid back nature of Texas as well. Escaping those busy hubs that they were previously part of. And I believe Texas is a lot more cleaner than a lot of some of those cities that they're coming from as well.
That is true.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so there's two more areas that I want to cover. And but before we start that, I actually want to cover a very, very funny story. When we finished university, and across the friends, it was almost like a 2-year staggered period. Some of the guys finished in 4 years, and some of us took 1 year extra, but I can't remember which year it was. I think it was the guys who kind of finished in the first year. It was, in the first batch. I will never forget that trip to the beach with some of us who just could not swim. And there was Tanesh. So listeners, for you to get a view of how good Tanesh is in swimming, in my world, there's two definitions. There's the guy who can swim out there with the sharks. That's Tanesh. And then those guys that are the sand sharks swimming at the sand. And that was Binesh and myself. Thankfully, Binesh actually became a very good swimmer. Or I think he's a better swimmer than I am. But I'll never forget that trip because we were like, oh God, look at this show off. He's out there beyond where the waves are breaking. And he's just like, oh yeah, come guys, it's really quite nice here. And we're like, no, that's like way past our ability. So I just thought I would mention that because we were talking about swimming and I meant to bring it up earlier. But I'll never forget that. I can't remember the beach. I'm sure Binesh remembers the beach that we went to that day. And it was pretty rough, the tide, and there was Tanesh out there so comfortable, and we were like, oh my God. And you didn't even give us any sort of, you didn't even pose a risk. We couldn't even say, hey, just be careful for our friend there. You were like, just so comfortable out there.
Yeah.
While we were swimming with the kids.
One of the things we used to do as part of our training was, on a Sunday morning, going out to the beach before the sun rises. I recall, we'd get there and we'd watch the sunrise at the beach, which is glorious. Every time I go to Durban, I make sure I do that. And then we'd get out into the water and we'd swim all the way out to the shark nets, right? Yeah. And kind of swim up and down and do a bit of training. Beyond the breakers, it's pretty. Believe me, Suren, when you get beyond the breakers one day, you'll realize that it's like a swimming pool. It's pretty flat, and it makes for good swimming. Obviously, there'll be 1 or 2 waves that come across, and you deal with them. But mostly, it's great fun, and I've made it a passion for me. Whenever I go on holiday or wherever I go, I look for opportunities to get in the water as much as possible, and it's been a fantastic experience. In Mauritius, for example, I was able to get out on a boat early in the morning and go out when the dolphins are coming in to shore for their breakfast. And, you're able to jump out of the boat, and they kind of position the boat such that, you're in the middle of a shoal of dolphins as they're coming in to shore. And I jumped into the water, and I was able to swim with these fantastic mammals. And that was really an awesome experience in my life. You really get a feeling that they are intelligent creatures And I don't know how thrilled they were having me in the water, but I felt that I was able to at least keep up with them. They when I say keep up, they like zoomed right past me, but I was in the mix. They were around and I touched them even. And that was an amazing experience. And when I went to Mexico, we swam in what they call cenotes, which is the caves that fill up with underground water. Absolutely beautiful, cool, clean, clear water. And I was able to swim in those cenotes. And when I went to Austin, they also have a huge swimming bath there that's about 1.5 kilometers long. Again, it's part of a river, and they dammed it up and made it into a pool. And so wherever I go in the world, I try to look for these unique swimming opportunities. And I've also been able to do some snorkeling as well, which is, that's the beauty of swimming, right? And that was always the selling point. Once you're able to swim and you're safe in the water, it opens up a whole world, underwater world of opportunities, and above water, world opportunities, right? And and that's the thing I always say about swimming. It really is the start to a whole new world of opportunities.
Wonderful. So yeah, it's a good pitch, Tanesh. It's a very good pitch. But you know my swimming ability. Like I tell my friends, I can swim enough so that I can surge towards that rope that's thrown in, so that I can go and grab it. If that boat happens to tip over, and it's about a 3 to 5 meter window, if I'm unable to hold onto that rope, I'm drowning. So, but that's a huge improvement compared to where I was before. At least I'm comfortable to put that. But look, jokes aside, the other part that you and I have always bonded, especially over, as I mentioned in the beginning, is music. And you were by far, in terms of a music collection, our go-to guy in university. And I'm so, I'm curious to know, when you were putting together your collections and your playlists, and I know your preference for genres is like me, it cuts across so many different areas. What are some of the special stories? I mean, I'll give you one of mine, and then maybe you'll know where I'm going with this. To this day, I still remember the very first cassette that I bought. Obviously, we ripped like hell, right? We ripped music like hell. And then Suren had a social conscience at some point and said he's not going to do it anymore. But let's just talk about the fact that, yes, everyone did it at some point. Now I have a fully fledged subscription to Apple Music, just putting it out there, right? But I've noticed that it still doesn't get me the full catalog that I'm interested in, and I'm still finding music that's not there, or artists or publishers are just
and also there. They disappear after time, right?
Correct. It's like Netflix.
You add them to your playlist, and you have it, and you think you have it like you would a record collection or a CD collection, and then one fine you stack it up and it's not available anymore. And you're like, oh my God, what happened there?
100%. Then you got to go back to your stash, as it were. That your stash that was kept in those hard drives, etc. So two interesting stories for me. So I was telling my kids the other days about some of the special stories, and there's three that stand out. So obviously the late Aaliyah, her first album, that was the first cassette that I bought, right?
Okay.
And the first CD that I bought was the Men in Black Will Smith single. That was the first one I had. Yes. Unfortunately, I've since, either the Aaliyah one got played so many times that tape probably broke, and the Will Smith one probably cracked over the years. And then obviously now that we gone digital, I didn't really hold on to it in terms of the actual physical album art and the cover and the case, etc.
Yes.
So those are two things that were very special. But the most important one was, those
Mhm.
trips to Pavilion almost every week, sifting through
Mhm.
CDs at Musica, and
Mhm.
then that kick-ass look and listen store opened
Yes.
in that bottom level at the time. And that was such a happy place for me because
Right.
I discovered, and if you remember, the look and listen had that closed off section. It almost looked like a smoker's lounge where the jazz CDs were kept. You
Mhm.
could see they were already much more cultured people. They wanted to have their own room. But it was
Yes.
cool. I understood when I got into that room why they needed it because it couldn't be listened to with the rest of the contemporary stuff, as it were. So you went into
Yes.
that room and you just like went into another world, and you picked out the jazz CDs. If you wanted to listen to it, there was those little devices there. You could put those headphones on and you could listen to a bit, to a sample or
Mhm.
whatever. And then you
Mhm.
started going through all the collections, the Sinatras and whatever. And what were your experiences like with unraveling music during that period as well? um I called it my kind of golden era in a sense because that was when I
Right.
was discovering all these genres, and you know me, I got an appreciation across, not just across west but east and west, and it just,
Right.
at any given day, depending on the emotion, I can pull something out and I can just get totally immersed. Tell us about what your experiences were during that golden age for you when you're discovering all of this and collecting all of
Yeah.
this.
So let me start initially. I have to give credit to my father because he had quite a eclectic um, what was it called, LP collection, right? That's what they
Wow.
way
What
back
was
then.
what was in his collection? Tell us some of
Yeah, so
those.
some of the famous ones that I remember playing over and over again was Please Please Me by the Beatles, of course.
Wow.
The first LPs we got exposed to had the famous Twist and Shout on that record. And some of the others were Creedence Clearwater Revival. There was Perry Como that I remember. So a number of artists from the 70s kind
Yes.
of was the big an exposure that I got in terms of music. And
Yeah.
after that, just like everybody else, right? We used to listen to the top 40 or top hits radio, and then we'll wait carefully with the cassettes
Cassette
radio,
record.
press record when the song comes on, and hope nobody says any words or the DJ doesn't come in at the wrong time,
Oh
and
shit,
then
the extra advert. No.
and that's where we got our recordings, right, from
Yeah.
the radio. And
Yeah.
later on, when we started doing odd jobs and being able to scrounge up and save a little bit of money, yes, we made it to the music stores. And one of the first CDs that I purchased was Dangerous by Michael Jackson.
What a
It was
classic.
a pride and joy of mine. And then I think after that, we purchased End of the Road by
Boys
Boys
to
to Men.
Men. Yeah.
And there were a few others that were kind of the first ones that I purchased, which was the music of the time, right? That's
Yes.
the listening to. And at that stage, the technology for CD writing was also developing at a tremendous pace. And I remember I purchased the first one-speed drive writer,
You were
which meant
light
that
years ahead of everyone on campus.
yeah, because that's true. It was among the first in the group that had one of those, and it allowed me then to be able to rip those CDs and then be able to convert them as well,
Yeah.
MP3 format, right? Which MP3 was just at that stage coming out as a new way of music being transmitted. And that was before we even started doing the downloading and so on and so forth, right? We were just taking, CDs, borrowing from friends and ripping them and then writing them on the one-time CD, which I might add also had a terrible success ratio. So for like every 10 CDs that you ripped. You know, you
Oh
had to
yeah.
have at least two or three of them that just
Oh
never finished.
yes. Oh yes. And
And
that used to frustrate me. And I think,
that,
Tanish, that that
yeah,
that for me may have been the reason also at the back of my mind as a part, in addition to the let's just call it doing the right thing. It used to
yes,
irritate me. Like, okay, yeah, no, there's 20 songs, and then, oh man, my favorite got like cut off, or like
yes,
there was
yes.
something wrong with the compression, or no, it couldn't fit. We thought it's gonna fit, but it didn't. So I was like, no,
Yeah,
no,
so there were
no,
lots of
no, no.
frustrations and challenges with the technology back then. But look, it started to move very quickly. You know, the 2 times drive came out, the 4 times drive, and the 8 times drive. Then you were really cooking. You know, you could really churn it out pretty quickly after that.
In next week's
Uh,
podcast, Tanesh talks about the technology behind CD writing.
yeah, so you know, once the music hit the internet, and you know, you were able to download the music that you wanted. You know, I think a lot of folks were not afraid with being able to take that music off the internet and then put it onto a CD. And so we were able to kind of corner the market to a certain extent,
Yeah.
and be able to, you know, provide a gap that was there. And mostly was just friends at school and college, you know, that
It
we
was
helped
our
out.
own little Napster network, let's just call it.
Yeah, that's and it was really just taking and sharing. You know, we got
Yeah.
this. It was like how kids do, you know, sharing of cards and baseball cards
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah.
We swapped songs. You know, that's what
Yes.
we did.
Of course. Of course.
And it was always cool when you were the first one in the group to get a hit song, and everybody will, you know, rush to share that with everybody else,
Yeah.
and that was the excitement. That
I
was
must admit, you're right. And like, it almost became like a bit of a drug. And I tell Lynette the story because, the weird story is she worked at that CNA next to Musica for years.
oh
And
really? I
I
didn't
used
know
to,
that.
and during those, my golden years, if you want to call it, right?
Uh-huh.
And I used to go into CNA and probably
Yeah.
passed her God knows how many times. But she was not in the music section, right? She was, I
Right.
think, in the magazines or whatever. And I clearly wasn't buying a lot of magazines at time. But
Yeah.
I would go to CNA if there was something that's not in Musica, or something not in Look and Listen, because CNA tended to be a little bit more pricier compared to Musica and Look and Listen.
Yes, I
It
remember
wasn't
that.
it
I
wasn't
recall
like
that.
specialized for music,
And
even
they
though
were
it had
mostly a
music.
hit factory. They had the hits mostly.
Yeah, a lot of like the mainstream stuff. If you didn't want the mainstream
Yes.
stuff, you needed to go to Look and Listen, and Musica was, kind of had best of both, and also had things like
Yes.
merchandise and some of the other things as well. So what are you listening to right now? Fascinated to
Oh,
know.
wow. So it's interesting because my interests just go. I let it kind of flow
Yes.
as and things proceed. So, I'll just give you an example. Recently, I got a hold of Will Smith's book, and I read his book, which was fantastic because he was one of the icons, right? Back
Yes.
when we he started off in the music, and then moved into the acting. The famous Will Smith, what was it called? His show,
Oh, you're talking about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Yeah.
The
Yes,
Fresh
yes.
Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
And then from there he went on to movie acting, and at some stage he was the highest paid movie actor in Hollywood. And so I read that book, and in the book, the I Am Legend movie was referenced. It was one of his first movies that was
Yeah.
a really hit. So I downloaded, I streamed I Am Legend and watched that again. And then I thought about some of the music that he played. And so, I started listening to his music. And
Yeah.
then I about some of the musicians that were, him, and I listened to them and some of the songs that he references, and
But
that's
that's what
kind
I
of
love. But that's what I love, right? Because
yeah,
once you read, you get this trigger. And I think I think you may have started reading that book because I think I posted it on the WhatsApp
Yeah,
group.
that's right. You
Say
mentioned it. That's
I had
correct.
just finished
That's
it.
right, Suren.
And I did the same,
Yeah.
right? So it was like, say, whatever, 2 months ago or a month ago, I finished that. And then I started going to his album. I started listening to Summertime and all of that stuff. But
Yes.
the one thing that I'll never forget with my discovery with music is when I was going through this, kind of listening phase of all these different genres, right? Because, obviously there's a lot of Eastern influence on our side. And, I'm very immersed with devotional music on the Eastern side,
Yes.
classical music, Carnatic music, is that as I started peeling away the levels, especially on the Western, in Western music, initially my base was pop because pop was contemporary. Pop
Right.
growing up in the 80s was contemporary. Then it started sliding into to rock, punk rock in the 90s, and but not forgetting all the other things that I continued to listen to, because obviously R&B was like a mainstay, listening to R&B and all the hits, the Boys to Men era, etc. But what I find the most fascinating for me in terms of a trigger to listen to music was imagery. And this is what is so fascinating. When I started seeing images of Jimi Hendrix, and you'd always see a poster. So you'd always go to maybe some musically themed shop or somebody's home or something out on TV, and they would have this image of Jimi Hendrix. And I was fascinated. I didn't even know who he was. And I think I then got introduced by our mutual group of friends during the Lugs days, and they said, no, this was Jimi Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix. And then I was like, oh, now I've got a name against that photo. Still didn't start listening to the music. They told me how good it was, etc. And because the playlists at Lugs were still kind of dictated by by the younger guys, so we didn't even have Jimi Hendrix on my catalog. And then I read the biography of Jimi Hendrix. Again, still didn't listen to a single CD of his.
Okay.
That triggered me after listening to that and seeing his development, being part of that group of Janis Joplin and having interactions with Little Richard and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones it just blew my mind open. And then I started going religiously through his albums, and I bought the greatest hits first, and I started then listening to the blues album that the late Alan Naidu told me about as well. And it was just so amazing. But it was so interesting to note that in that case, it wasn't the listening that actually got me, it wasn't just picking up the music from the radio that got me interested. It was actually imagery.
Right.
And I'll never forget that. And it's so weird because I played that so often in Durban when I went into my Jimi Hendrix phase, that my nephew, Darshan, got an appreciation for it. Because, I mean, listening to his guitar riffs, it is like an acquired taste. Not many people appreciate it on the first play. Some people will say, no, this is far too noisy. The vocals are off tune, etc. But that was Jimi Hendrix, right? And I just found it fascinating that the whole way, or my path to Jimi Hendrix, was actually just based on posters. Seeing this guy with the big hair, with the dress, etc. And yeah, I mean, it's just something that's so interesting that how these different triggers and art, get you going, and you start, as I call it, peeling away the layers and discovering. And that's I suppose that's what's so great about music as well.
Yes. And I particularly nowadays have been enjoying reading the books by other musical artists. I enjoy trying to figure out, when we listen to a song and you listen to the lyrics and you think, well, this is how this individual
very superficial level, right? It's very
how it came about, right? And then when you actually listen to them explain, and some of them are superficial,
of course.
Not all
especially if they're not very invested in the songwriting, right? Because again, I mean, you got some really good artists that don't do songwriting.
Correct. Just absolutely right. Yes. So that's an interesting aspect for me, is how the origination of the idea that then became a song that was a
Yes.
worldwide.
Yes.
You know, I enjoy taking that trip and understanding how that came about. And then also I like to understand who are the influences of those artists,
Yeah.
produced that they listen to, that then influence their music,
Yes.
and how translation happened from, probably, 2 or 3 decades, right,
Yes.
prior to listening to those artists, and then they're making their music, and how those the sound converts across
Yeah.
all those years in the new generation,
Yeah.
So the kind of things that I'm interested in, that I look for when I listen to the music and when I read the books
Yes.
about the artists. And
No,
that's what
awesome.
kind of I find really interesting,
Yeah, but that's what's so great, and that's what you and I can share when
Yes.
we get talking about this. So Tanesh, the hour, as you notice, is quickly gone by.
Oh my gosh. Really?
And
Wow.
firstly, I just want to say a big thank you. You're one of the earliest guests on this podcast, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you on board. All the very, very best with life in Texas. And
Yes.
I wish you all the best, and I hope it's a huge success for you for however long you plan to stay there. I do want to call you out on 2 aspects to confirm that you've become fully Americanized. You are no longer
Okay.
saying water; you are saying water, and you are saying words like folks. And folks.
Okay.
Your video stream has paused. I don't know for dramatic effect or what. Are you there? Tanesh, are you there? Oh my god. This is priceless. The image is captured. I'm not sure whether we end the call. Tanesh, are you there? But at the moment when we got cut off, your picture froze. Okay.
Uh-huh.
While you were laughing, and it's quite funny. So, but anyway, you'll see that on the video. Okay. So Tanesh, firstly, thank you so much for making this call. I know it's late night in Texas. You want to remind the listeners what's the time right now?
Yeah, it's about 11:15 p.m. Still Friday.
Yeah, it's still Friday, and have a well-deserved break this weekend. And
yeah, thank you, and same to you.
Yeah, thanks so much again for being one of the early people on this podcast.
Thanks very much, Soren. I really enjoyed being on the show with you, and also enjoyed the fantastic trip down memory lane. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I wish you all the best in your career, and I look forward to listening to many, many episodes of your podcast. You have a strong fan over here on the other side of. And really, my message to everybody is keep swimming and keep having beer. Thanks.
Nice way to end up. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of this episode of Addicted to Creating. Thank you so much for staying with us for the hour. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic morning, fantastic evening, or fantastic middle of the night from wherever you guys are listening. And look forward to catching up with you soon. This is your host, Suren Govender, and catch you next time. Thank you. Addicted to Creating.